All right. It's time for Buckeye Grove Instant Access.
It's about time.
With the latest breaking news, analysis, and much, much more from around the world of Ohio State. Brought to you by BuckeyeGrove.com and the Unscripted Ohio Podcast Network.
You're so money and you don't even know it.
Let's move quickly and hand it off to our host, Kevin Noon.
It's time to start running!
Hey, thanks for joining us here on the BIA podcast. I am your host, Kevin Noon. I'll be joined with Mark Givler here shortly. A lot of recruiting news on the forefront right now for the Buckeyes. May not be any visits at this time as we're undergoing, some definitely scary times out there with the COVID-19 virus. But, we want to talk about some football, and we got some great recruiting. So I'm going to bring in Mark right now, and we're going to just get right off to the big news that just happened a few minutes ago, the commitment of Evan Pryor. Mark, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, this is a big one. They've been recruiting a group of about 5 or 6 running backs that are all, I think, pretty even. I mean, we can pick apart each one of them individually, but they had a set group of about half a dozen guys that they've really been targeting here the last several months, and Evan was certainly one of those guys. He's kind of a home run hitter. He's got big time speed and great junior season down there in the Charlotte area, and just a guy that can do a lot of different things in space and as well as between the tackles. So definitely a big time running back, and I think it's got to feel good for them to get one early. Takes a little bit of the pressure off, and a little of the angst in the from the fan base takes that kind of out of play a little bit, getting one, and now they get to go and focus here on some of these other guys.
Yeah, you talk about taking off a little bit of the pressure there. Ohio State, running back recruiting did not necessarily go according to plan in the class of 2019, but I think we were both saying just be patient. 2020 could really end up being a pretty special year. Evan Pryor definitely fills that role of being a special type of player.
Yeah, he's like I say, he's a home run hitter. He can take it the distance. Can do some things out of the backfield, catching the ball. Kind of a Do we mention Bijan Robinson ever again on the website or the podcast or no? I don't know, but maybe a little bit of that type of game to him in terms of his ability to hit home runs and to do some things in space and out of the backfield catching the football. And a guy they've liked for a long time, and definitely a big win because I think a lot of people saw the Ohio State North Carolina battle, and I think people have kind of assumed, well, Ohio State has to win that. And it's like, I don't know. If you've been paying attention lately, North Carolina has been beating Alabama and all sorts of other big-time programs for some of their local kids. So not as easy to get those kind of guys out of North Carolina anymore. Mac Brown's got a lot of momentum. And so pulling a kid like this, probably harder than it may have appeared.
Yeah, Ohio State staying strong in North Carolina as Mac Brown is kind of closing the border a little bit. Now, you talk about Ohio State focusing in on half a dozen running backs at this point. Now that Evan Pryor is in the fold as a verbal commitment, what does that mean for this running back board? I mean, the talk was there that, they definitely needed to get at least 2 in this class, but, what's next?
Yeah, I think obviously, the one guy who they've just been in love with for over a year now, and they've just put all the resources they can into recruiting is Donovan Edwards out of West Bloomfield up in Michigan, outside of Detroit. And that's the guy who certainly is going to see an increased focus, even more so than what has been there, because now it's probably one spot. Would they take him and Trevion Henderson or Kamar Wheaton? Would they take 2 of those 3? I would have to imagine it would be awfully difficult to say no to any of those guys. But at the same time, getting 2 of them with Pryor already, that just seems like a lot. And in a class where the numbers maybe aren't going to be quite as big as they have been, I think that's going to be a challenge. So I think, short term, Donovan Edwards is going to be a big one. Yes, they're going to continue with Travion Henderson, who may be moving up his timeline. That's going to be the interesting thing with Henderson is he has to visit. And if this COVID-19 thing continues to kind of wreak havoc in terms of getting visits in and things like that, that could be a situation where maybe the timing doesn't work out and you could maybe see him going off the board somewhere else if he's not going to wait until May or June at this point. But, Donovan Edwards is going to be certainly the guy that everyone talks about. There's no reason to not continue to keep your hat in the Kamar Wheaton sweepstakes as long as you've got a spot. I'm sure they'll continue on that one. Corey Kiner, probably the guy who may suffer the most from this prior commitment. I think they'll wait and see how Edwards, Henderson, Wheaton, I think they'll kind of let that trend out here in the next several weeks. What that means for Kiner, I'm not sure yet. I mean, that may not be great news for his possibilities in this class, but certainly they'll continue to recruit him as long as there's still room available and these other guys are still out there weighing their options.
We're going to take a break here in a second, but before we do that, more news earlier today with the commitment of in-state defensive back Devonta Smith. What does that mean to the, what's Ohio State getting there?
Yeah, so they offered him just a few days ago, actually. I believe it was Thursday. A guy they've been watching for a while, Jordan Hancock, commits to Clemson. Makes a lot of sense then to not, drag this out until June or July and, camp and everything else. They saw, enough there. I know, I'm sure that's a guy, Kerry Combs, took some looks at on film pretty early on in terms of taking the job and went right down there. Devontae told me the first day Combs landed in Columbus. He was down at the high school. He drove down to Cincinnati. So, that's been kind of percolating for a little bit. I think the Hancock news probably sped things up a little bit. But this may have come down anyway at the end of the month. He was supposed to visit late March. Obviously, that's not going to be happening, so they're going to have to reschedule that with his family. But, great kid, super competitive. I don't know if he's quite 6 feet tall, but he is long. And I think he'll give them some versatility. I think he's the type of kid who both physically can project to a few different spots, but also has kind of the mental fortitude to learn different spots, different situations. Could be a slot corner guy, could be like a Damon Arnett type where you can play him inside or outside. But definitely some excellent insurance along with J.K. Johnson to get this corners class started because it's a very important class.
And we'll talk about the defensive backboard here in a second, but let's take a break with one of our great sponsors.
Hague Water Conditioning has been treating well in city water in Central Ohio with American-made water filtration products for over 60 years. Have a water quality problem? The water treatment experts at Hague know how to solve it. Not sure if your water softener is working? They will test, inspect, and sanitize any brand of water softener for only $20. Schedule a system checkup or water test today by calling 614-836-2195 or visit them online at HagueH2O.com. That's HAGUE H2O.com.
Welcome back to the BIA podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Noon, joined with Mark Givler. And so, Ohio State goes out and gets themselves a solid in-state defensive back today with Devonta Smith. I mean, what, we can couple that with the recent commitment of J.K. Johnson as well. I mean, what does this mean for the defensive backboard? I mean, with where Ohio State is, it was so critical in terms of them really focusing, especially at corner, this season and bring in Kerry Combs, now where they're kind of standing, it seems that they're really getting, starting to check off some boxes there.
Yeah, it's not too different from what we kind of talked about with prior in terms of maybe taking some pressure off. You've got two corners now. You're certainly going to add a third one. You're probably going to add a fourth corner type of guy who is kind of a hybrid that will likely eventually become a safety, not too different from a guy who like Jordan Fuller coming out of high school who was a corner. But it allows you to kind of gather yourself, take a deep breath. You've got two you really like. And now it's like, okay, there's Tony Grimes out there. Do you want to keep knocking on Jordan Hancock's door? You probably do. I don't know how, the furthest thing from that kid's mind right now is probably flipping from Clemson. But yet you were in a good spot there before that Clemson visit. That may be worth continuing. And you just kind of, zero in on your top couple of guys. And that also buys Kerry Combs some time. He's going to lose the spring evaluation period, or at least some of it. We don't know how much yet. That was going to be critical for him to get on the road and look at maybe some fringe guys and find someone he really likes. I mean, I think people are set in their ways in terms of, this has to be the board or this has to be the guy. And I think people forget that, this upcoming spring evaluation period that was, hopefully we're still going to have some of it. That was when Seven Banks got offered. There's no Seven Banks at Ohio State without the spring evaluation period. There's probably no Clark Phillips commitment last year. I know he didn't end up there, but there's probably no Clark Phillips commitment last year if there's no spring evaluation period. So these are important things. And so now, whether it's in June for camps or if they do get some of the spring evaluation period back, it's going to be important for him to be able to go out and evaluate. And he might fall in love with a guy, and there might be someone that we're not even really talking about yet. But it gives them the breathing room to be able to kind of focus on those things without the panic or the urgency of, oh my goodness, we don't have any yet and we need three or four. So it does a lot there, I think, in terms of helping them move forward.
It's kind of crazy the way that this, the recruits, the commits are falling right now. We're in a period where nobody really expected there to be a lot of movement. Ohio State goes out and lands a couple of, a guy that's very high in the Rivals 100 in Johnson. You look at Evan Pryor, he's in the, the top 80 nationally. And it sounds like we still may be talking about more commitments coming up here too, as well as, things just seem to be moving at a great pace for the Buckeyes.
Yeah, I initially thought we'd see a slowdown. I thought maybe everybody would kind of just gather themselves, reassess after things open back up, push their visits back. And there are people that are doing that. There are certainly kids that are doing that, families that are doing that right now. But there's also a run of commitments, not just at Ohio State. There's been a bit of a run nationally. I believe Wisconsin, Purdue both had commitments in the last day or two. We're seeing some kids who, whether it's a sense of urgency caused by this situation, or whether it's just simply a matter of they were, pretty sure where they were going anyway. And now that it's, kind of an unknown in terms of when they might be able to do those other visits, that they just said, let's not even worry about it. Let's just lock it in now. And so we're seeing two very different schools of thought where no one's going to be able to kind of stick to their original time frame. Kids are either deciding, okay, I've got to push this up here a couple of months, or I've got to push it back a couple of months. And so we're seeing two very different lines of thought, but it has been a mixed bag of, some kids doing one and some kids doing the other. It hasn't been a clear-cut trend in either direction. So here we are, and, right now he didn't come out right out and say it, but it certainly looks like four-star defensive back Andre Turrentine out of Ensworth in the Nashville area. It certainly looks like he's about to maybe commit somewhere tomorrow morning. So this could keep going this week.
Yeah, and with the defensive back you're talking about out of Nashville, a lot of staff futurecasts here on the Rivals.com network are saying potentially Ohio State. So you just don't know.
Yeah, it's always sounded pretty good for Ohio State here. There's always been a little bit of question of like, okay, where does he fit into the whole picture, both in terms of corner versus safety, which I still think is probably to be determined on that front. But I think Jordan Hancock committing to Clemson kind of opened the floodgates here a little bit in terms of allowing Ohio State to really to push here the last week or two for some of these other guys without too much worry about numbers and getting overcrowded too early and things like that. So sounds like they've really pushed here the last couple of weeks, more so than just, staying in the game. It sounds like it's been more of a push to, hey, let's do this. And if he announced it, if tomorrow morning's a commitment, I really think it's going to be Ohio State.
Crazy times that we're in, and we're going to start doing more recruiting podcasting here, as there's not much going on in the way of sports, where we can maybe tackle some big issues and just look at some of the guys already in the class. I want to thank Mark for joining us, and I want to thank you for listening here to the BIA podcast. I am your host, Kevin Noon, and we'll be back with you very shortly.
Be sure to stay up to date with Buckeye Grove Instant Access when the news breaks or after the big game, exclusively at BuckeyeGrove.com or anytime on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher as part of the Unscripted Ohio Podcast Network. Hit that subscribe button so you can stay in the know and never miss a single episode.